Sorry, Melina. Sorry. Three. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this little recording that is being made in an emergency with groups from north and south of Ireland and international groups here coming to you today to explain to you what's happening and why we have an environmental crisis and why we have an energy crisis, what's actually going on and what you need to do as a matter of urgency to help. And it's very important that you understand what's happening. Knowledge is power. So here are the people who have knowledge and understanding, and they're going to help you to understand and empower you to take action on this issue. Can we start, please, with Owen?
So last Sunday, Shannon LNG, which is a fracked gas import terminal that is trying to get built down the road from my hometown in North Kerry, they got a successful challenge in the High Court against the government and on board pleanála, who refused their permission last year for this import terminal. It's owned by New Fortress Energy, who export fracked gas from America all over the world. They've been trying to build this since 2018. The terminal has been trying to build since long before that. So basically, we're in a very urgent situation because this is up for remittal on October 14th. So we really need a policy change before we really need a policy change, you know.
Eddie, can you tell us, how did we get into this situation? What happened till we got to this crisis situation within the country?
Yeah, well, the history of it is that you know, we've been fighting fracking in Ireland since 2011, and we finally got fracking banned here in 2017. And then we realised that the government wanted to bring frack gas into Ireland. So, you know, we knew this gas then was coming from Pennsylvania, and we know those people. They helped us here. They told their stories. And we didn't want to be involved in poisoning people that we knew in America instead of us being poisoned here in Leitrim. So we continued to campaign with Safety Before LNG and all these other groups. And what happened was we realised that the Green Party were going to be a big part of government. There was this green wave happening, and we understood that the Greens were going to have power. And at one stage, we asked Eamon Ryan to agree not to go into government with a party that would bring in frack gas imports. And so Richard Bruton, so there was a debate in the Dáil at the time, Breed Smith organised that, and everybody in the Dáil agreed that we didn't want frack gas imports. You know, the consensus that was there from fracking continued into the discussions on frack gas imports. But Richard Bruton put Shannon LNG on the PCI list. And at the time, Eamon Ryan said that he didn't have a mandate, that he had a mandate to go into government, and that he didn't have a mandate at that particular time to stand up to Richard Bruton about a future government. So we started to build a campaign, and we understood that the Greens needed a 2/3 majority to go into government. So we focused on the Green Party. And in the end, Eamon Ryan made stopping Shannon LNG a red line issue for the Green Party. So the Greens, we backed the Greens going into government so that they could deliver an end to this idea of frack gas imports. And they had the full consensus of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in those early years. And it was difficult because there was a lot of pushback. But in May 21, they created the world's first ban on LNG terminals. And the planning application that New Fortress Energy put in was stopped initially because of that ban. But what the court has decided is that the act that An Bord Pleanála acted too quickly in making that decision, that they should have waited on the outcome of this security of supply review that Richard Bruton started. So our ban on LNG terminals was subject to the outcome of a review on security of supply. But what happened then, and what's of concern, is that after 2021, well, after September 23, when Shannon LNG's planning application was rejected, Eamon Ryan came forward with new policy, and this new policy was to build an LNG terminal. So, like, really, there isn't very much difference between the LNG terminal that Eamon Ryan is building now, was going to build, and the terminal that New Fortress Energy had originally proposed. The only difference would be that maybe Eamon Ryan might have a bit more control over his terminal, but the reality is that they're both really the same. And now this old project fits into Eamon Ryan's new policy. So if this old frack gas import terminal project gets assessed under Eamon Ryan's new policy, it's very hard to see that it wouldn't get planning permission. So we're kind of in this crisis now, and we're worried that Eamon Ryan's going to use this crisis to promote his LNG terminal. And one of the things that the Greens stopped talking about was stopping frack gas imports. The SEPA report, which looked at this, they said that they couldn't propose what they called a commercial LNG terminal because it would bring in frack gas imports, and that was against government policy. So then there was a discussion about a backup terminal that wouldn't be used. So this idea that Eamon Ryan and the Greens have said now yesterday that this terminal wouldn't import frack gas is based around an idea that it wouldn't be used, which is not what the government are saying. It's not what Eamon Ryan is saying. So we're talking about using frack gas from Pennsylvania as a backup for Eamon Ryan's plans for offshore wind and for continuing to meet future demand. And the idea that we're not going to use it is based around us meeting our commitments under the climate legislation, which we have failed to do completely. So we're in this is about a frack gas import terminal, whether it's Eamon Ryan's terminal or Shannon LNG's terminal. It will always end up as New Fortress Energy's or Shannon LNG's terminal in the Shannon Estuary, and it needs to be stopped.
Ryan, could you tell us, why you see this as an issue? What other problems do you see with this?
I suppose, as a community activist for many years and concerned about community development and community and rural development and environmental issues, I'd say that for a lot of people and for me, this is all very confusing. And the confusion comes from many things, because we see a crackdown on households, for instance, extracting a fossil fuel in their peat. And we do know that the small energy domestic users, their demand for energy is down, while the large commercial users is up. And we see this in the increase in data centers and also the rapid expansion of delivering gas infrastructure. There's a power station proposed in Portumna Gas, one of the Midlands, on a former peat site for Bord na Móna. So what I would say is the overall view that I have is confusion, and particularly when we know that we've already banned fracking in Ireland, that we have a policy and a moratorium on LNG terminals brought in by our government. And it's not just Greens. Like, Greens are one element of government, but I think it's the whole of government, and everybody has a concern and should have a concern here. So, when you're told you can't take your peat out, but then the government seems to be suggesting now, after this corporation went to the courts here, this is I think an international, huge international corporation went to the Irish court and High Court and said, can An Bord Pleanála review this in light of changes in policy? So, and what are they going to do? They're going to import fracked gas from the United States, where it does huge damage to communities, far more than your peat extraction does here, far more damage on a wide scale. And the technology and the energy used to cool that gas, to liquefy it, and to bring it into the Shannon estuary on boats seems very, very confusing to me, and to many people, I would imagine. So what has changed? We see a lot of different things being suggested, that there's jobs in this, that there's, energy supply and security issues because of the war. But we do know that we have the pipeline bringing in sufficient gas and sufficient for the growth even. But I would say what we see here is a large corporate extractive industry building more fossil fuel infrastructure in Ireland, while you're telling the ordinary person, you can't do this anymore. That creates huge confusion for me, and particularly when our government seems to be confused about what they want in policy. And I thought the policies were clear: a ban on fracking, moratorium on LNG, brought in, as Eddie has already explained. So we see a lot of narratives that are creating confusion over this. And also, our climate targets come into it, our energy use and the demand for energy as well. But what I see, and what I'm very clear about, is huge corporate interests taking over this and this infrastructure, and more or less pushing around our Bord Pleanála, our government, and creating confusion at government level even in this. So what I would say is, we have to stand and say, hold on a second, we're not confused. We just want to stop this. The River Shannon is very important to many people for many different reasons. And to put what's talked about, this installation at the end of it, either on the water or on the banks of the Shannon, it seems mad to me, because it's dangerous infrastructure. It can be a target as much and more than any pipeline, because it's a static infrastructure. So I would say those narratives are completely out, because they're creating the confusion that is trying to bring this in. So I would say, let's stop this now. Our communities and those where this fracking is taking place deserve better from a community perspective, but also from an environmental and safety perspective. And safety has been a reason for us to ban fracking. It's a reason to stop this here now. So I'd say, let's protect our communities and our environment and say no here. And we need to take the steps now to do that very fast.
Thank you, Brian. I think it's a lot to do with, like, you're talking there a lot about people taking responsibility, and the need for people to take responsibility in this situation, because somebody has to. We hear the IPCC crying out to everybody, no new fossil fuel infrastructure. We all have a responsibility in that regard. And they talk about the grotesque lies of the industry that lead us into this situation, that can also lead us to possibly confusion over things at times. Melina, is there an alternative to this narrative?
Yeah, I think we need to focus on reducing the demand at the source. The Irish government have this policy to build as many data centres as the big tech want. So those data centres are mainly, US big tech. So Ireland is almost becoming a carbon haven for those companies. I think the energy demand is 13% of the Irish energy demand at the moment, and expected to go up to 30% by 2030. And as Eddie and Brian were saying, the residential demand has dropped. So while the government is telling us to reduce our use, they're opening up the door wide open for US tech companies to come in, and they use the energy of huge towns of 250,000 homes in one data center, and when they go through planning, they seem to be covered by the ETS, the emissions trading scheme, and the planning authorities just look at it and say, okay, well, so the emissions are written off, so that's fine. But in reality, those emissions, they are occurring. The pollution of new gas power plants, which are connected to the data centers, they are still going to be polluting the air around the people that live nearby. And the energy consumption of, the emissions from data centers, it appears, could be 500% higher than had been recorded previously. So we need to look into that, because as the EPA have said, and Brian and Eddie mentioned as well, the emissions targets for Ireland were completely off track. The EPA know that, the government know that. We're looking at maybe a 50% failure on emissions targets by 2030. And yeah, so these industries, and I'd like to just point out Auchanish Illumina as well is using 13% of the gas demand in Ireland, and they also want to expand, and the government are, fully behind them. So industry is really driving the demand, and we need to look at the Ireland's share of energy use and emissions on the planet. We have to acknowledge, I think, that the Irish footprint per person is huge compared to, probably 90% of the global population. And the government is pinning that on us, on the domestic user, for cooking, for heating your home. And that is simply not the case. We are just like a carbon haven, as I said, for big industry, which are allowed to do anything they want. So yeah, we need to look at degrowth and to come back into lifestyles that are within the planetary boundaries, rather than just thinking about growth all the time and speaking about growth and jobs. Like, these jobs won't be around when the storms are destroying, Irish homes and crops, like with floods. And so we just need to have a reality check.
That's excellent. Thank you, Melina. Tony, an international voice. We're talking here about, alternatives, alternative solutions to this. We've got a very strong government narrative saying, well, they could blow up the pipeline, they could do this, we need it for energy security. Well, there seems to be a general thought that it's really about the government looking after corporate interests, and to heck with the IPCC and the climate change and everything else like that. What are your thoughts on that, Tony?
Okay, well, as far as the security argument is concerned, that's pretty ridiculous. We're not even part of the same security network or gas network that most of Europe is connected to. We're connected to Britain and to Norway, neither of which are likely to enter in a war soon. And as some of people have said, if we put in a gas institute, if we enter into a war, what are they going to blow up first? The first thing they're going to blow up is an LNG plant. It's one bomb and the whole thing blows in one go. But really, look, what I'm trying to say here is that we're not anti-energy. We know that the future for energy is electricity. This is a thing that's going to be used for electricity. We should use as little electricity as possible. We need electricity. And what we need is clean electricity. We don't need filthy, expensive, dangerous solutions that come from corporations called New Fortress Energy, or even governments that think they can provide an alternative to the same thing, which is exactly the same thing, a storage of an extremely volatile gas that could blow up at any moment, that is extraordinarily expensive, hard to get when there is a shortage of gas. We may not get a shipment when we need one. And it probably, the port isn't even connected via pipelines to the grid. So we have to put all those pipelines in. It's going to be incredibly expensive. And by the time it's put in place, we won't be using gas. So it doesn't make any sense.
Thank you, Tony. Sinead, I'm going to come to you finally. You know, we've heard a lot there about the dangers, the risks, the false narratives, the creation of this, the interests of corporations, over and above the interest even of farmers and the basic everyday consumers that are being hit, with all sorts of restrictions, in terms to try to facilitate for the interests of corporations in this. It's a very serious thing. The deadline is fast approaching. We've got this October the 14th that Owen was talking about. Could you tell us what you think, people watching this now, what can they do? What should they do? Who has the power right now? Who can stop this, and who needs to do what right now?
Well, actually, the answer is that we have the power. I truly believe that. I truly believe that the power is in each person who is watching this. We have been out on the streets before, and before the ban on LNG came about, before that moratorium, it was the people who made that happen. It was the people who made that happen by getting out in the street, by emailing, by lobbying. And at this point, I think the best thing to do is to email, is to trust that you can do something about this. We know that fracking is bad. We know that importing frack gas is just as bad. The process is extremely wasteful. There are alternatives. We don't necessarily need a gas storage supply. So please don't be convinced by this argument. We want to put out an alternative argument. The government are saying that we need another gas supply, we need a storage. We don't. There's actually very little evidence to support that. And this is the kind of email that you need to send to your representative, your TD. Particular pressure has to be put on the Greens, because the Greens have the ministry. So the Green Party Eamon Ryan is the Minister for the Environment. Roger O'Gorman he's the leader of the Green Party, who have the ministry. All of the TDs, they all have a say in what happens, as do the senators, as do other members of the Green Party. So we do need to put particular pressure on the Green Party. We can also email Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, because they are in government and they are part of this. It isn't the Greens working all alone to make this unnecessary LNG terminal that puts corporate interests first. It's not just the Greens. It is the Greens, but it's not just the Greens. So I think if you were ever going to send an email, this is the biggest fossil fuel infrastructure in Ireland. This would be. It blows everything else, completely out of the water. It's in the Shannon. It's in Kerry. It's an iconic place in Ireland, the Shannon estuary. We just don't want it. What we need is a ban on LNG terminals. What we need is a policy that puts a moratorium on LNG terminals. How we bring that about is you email your TD and you say you want a moratorium on LNG terminals right now. And the reason it's very important to do it right now, just before if you can, before the 14th of October, is because that's when the application for Shannon LNG will go back into the system, into On Board pleanála. And if the policy is left as it is now, that will get permission. So we have to change it. We have to put this moratorium back in place. Please email your TD, phone them up. Don't be afraid to phone them. If you've been on the streets before, and I know many of you have, for Shannon LNG, this is the time to pick it back up again and do something. If you've never done it before, this is the time to do it for the first time.
Thank you very much, Sinead. Now, thank you everybody who has contributed, and there was lots more people who were part of a bigger discussion before we actually got round to doing this. I can sum up by basically saying that we all have a responsibility, whether you're thinking about this, you're thinking about the Shannon, you're thinking about the corporate industry putting their interests first, you're thinking about the IPCC, you're thinking about the fires, the floods and the famine that come from the expansion of fossil fuel industry. Whatever your motivation, even if it is that we have to make democracy work in energy, and we have to have democracy, we have to have the public interest come first, not the corporation interests, because they are not interested in a sustainable future. So we need to have democracy now. Now is the time to make democracy happen in this. And you all know what you need to do. Everybody needs to take responsibility. Thank you very much for listening to this, and please take action immediately. Thank you.